Let us look at this concept. Let us look at shell variables. Okay. Now let's say we want to create a script that's actually, what does this script does? What does it do? The script is to greet a user, asking them their name. Okay. Then after it asks them about their name, the next thing is that the user will have opportunity to input their name. Then after the user has been able to input his or her name, the next thing is that this script will greet the user and say hello by the name of the user, the name that the user imputed. So I threw a challenge to the group the other time where I tagged it as challenge one, part one, challenge one, where we have, okay, this is it here. He said, how do you create a shell script that asks the user to enter their full name, asks the user to enter their year of birth, and then the shell script does the calculation on this year and then return it. Now it now prints to the screen, you are welcome, and the name of the user, and then it prints to the screen again. So you are the age of the user. Probably the user is about 44 years, so it will be like you are 44 or you are 32. So this is basically how can we create something like this. Now the essence of this, why I actually chose this in order to share with us, is that there are some things that will be learned in this script if we eventually create it, and it will serve as a pointer, and it will serve as how will I say it? It will serve as an entry point for to give us understanding about how C program works and programming language works generally. Okay, so this time around we are trying to create a script that is kind of interactive. So now let me copy this task and let's see how we can what how we can come about it. There's a noise coming from somewhere. Oh. Okay, guys,
Brandon or something. I think it is
that's what I'm
Brandon.
trying to do. The noise is okay. I've been able to mute it. Okay, now before we dive into that, I was on something. I don't want to mix it up, please. I was on shell variables. Okay, shell variables is something that we will eventually automate, just like every programming language. I don't know. We should have heard about variables before. You understand? As far as programming is concerned, there are concepts like variables, constant, string, data type, you know, that operators and so on like that, that we, of course, we will always meet. And it is necessary that we have understanding of what these things mean. Now, the first thing among them is variables, as it is that there are variables in C language, also there are variables in Shell. Shell itself is a programming language. Okay, to break this down to be explicit, Shell itself is a programming language, and it can be used for scripting and for automation and so on like that. Okay, now what are variables? Variables are just like identifier, anything that can be used to identify anything. You understand? So, and one thing about variable is that they change. They have the tendency to change their value to change at the end. or during the course of the program. Another definition is that variable can just be, you can just call it like anything that can serve as a container to hold values. Okay. So, for example, if you want to, you can, if you want to store your clothes, okay, you need to store your clothes in a bag. You understand, in a container, and that container we have a name. We can call it a bag. You understand? So, name, the variable we are talking about here is a bag, and what is its purpose is to for what? For storing your clothes. Now, do you know that the value of, okay, let me make it interactive. Let me project everything I'm saying. You know, you can see variable variable like a container for holding or storing values. You understand? Example for illustration, a bag, okay, for storing what? You can, for storing clothes. Okay. Now, do you know that we can actually change the value of this bag by what? We can still have a bag that can really what? Store, we can use it to store probably books, you know? I don't know. So what matters here is that variables are just like identifiers or anything used to identify an entity, either one is too big, or data, or just used to identify or an entity, data, or values, or used to hold values or entities or data. So that's basically what variables are. So one thing about variable is, characteristics of variable is that they could change, their value could change. You understand? So that's what makes variable different from constant. When you say constant, constant means something that is, that cannot change, that is, it is the way it is. You know, we have in mathematics, we have constant values. When we say pi, pi is always 22/7 or 3.14. So it's a constant value. But when you talk about variables, they can change, the values can change. If you talk about age of a person, of course, age of a person can change as the person what? As the person grows or as time passes by, the person's age changes. So example of variable like that. Just understand very basic concept. Variables, anything that holds value and they have the tendency to change, have the tendency of changing its value. Okay. So now the same thing happens in shell. You understand, where you can have variables. Now variables are often or obviously needed either to what? To program, to carry out program, or to write program, or to execute any operation. You understand? You know, computer as it is it base for you to call a computer, three things must be available, where you have the input, the process, and the output. So when you talk about input, okay, there must be an input, there must be something that must what? Must be given. And after that, there must be an operation process that must be what? That must happen. And after that, there must be an output that will be given to the screen. For example, if you talk about how do we write a program that adds two number, okay, a program that adds two numbers. So obviously, if we break this down into algorithm, we must have number one, and then we must have number two, two numbers. And of course, we are talking about what? The operator that is needed to be used here. We are talking about addition, okay, which is the plus operator. Excuse me, the plus operator, addition. Then for this to make sense, we don't just want to add and then add for adding sake. There must be a result. So we must have number one, number two, then we have what? Results. Or we call it sum. So there is an input that is needed and there's another input that is needed. Now there will be a process which will be what? That will be applied. Sorry, this process operator will be applied on the number one, number two, and then what? There will be the output, which is the sum. So the essence of variables to hold values. So now, um, in shell, okay, or in batch scripts, unlike every other program, variables are identified with the dollar sign. Okay, any any value, okay, or any entity that has the dollar sign begin at the beginning of it, it is regarded as a variable. We can have something like part variable. We can have a variable that we created, user defined variable name. We can have um, we can have number. We can have age. You can call it anything, you know, it working directory, user, home directory. These are even default shell variables. You understand? This one that are in capital letters. So what are we trying to project here? In shell, variables are identified. In shell, variables are identified what? They are identified by the dollar symbol. All right, symbol. So now the next thing is, how do we create variable in shell? It is, in fact, for me it is pretty simple, like the simplest thing. And now I want everybody to like have how will I say it? This is a suggestion for me. Okay, I want everyone to like have more interest in the shell, the Linux, trying to understand, trying to manipulate and do a lot of things. To be sincere, if one can be able to understand the shell very well, you see Python programming language will be very, very easy. And of course, we have been told that if we can understand C programming language, every other language will be so easy. So I'm not even talking about the shell. Of course, understanding the shell, you'll be able to understand the C programming language because the C the C language is closer to the machine level language. And in fact, some of the things used by the shell are actually used in in C2. So now we're now moving forward to Python. It will be so easy. Okay. So how do we create how do we create variables in shell? It is just as simple that you just have the variable name equals to no space. You know, you can say name equals to Shelby. That's just it. Now, this is just the basic way of creating variables. Of course, we will not forget that we are writing a script. There must be this man that must be at the top of every of our shell script, the shebang. Okay? So if we say something like this, shebang or ashbang in bash, then proceeding this way, we have started creating variables. And how do I target variable? How do I get reference? Okay, that's the keyword. How do I reference a variable? I can just say echo, and then for me to reference the variable, I can say echo hello, and sorry, this is a normal string, and I can reference the variable name, and this output will be hello Chevy. Sorry, this thing is not correct. So it will be this way, hello Chevy, according to what this format that has been given here. So obviously Variables can just be created with the variable name equals to and then its value, and we can reference it by what, adding the dollar sign to what, to to the given name that was specified, to the given name of the variable. All right. So now a brief crash course. There's something we call data type. You understand? Of course, when we start our language series now, everything will become easier for us. So I want our C study to be a series, and probably we could be starting tomorrow, so we can we can be able to follow up like that. And if we want to go back to the video, it will be easier to check the concept. So we have data type in 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 programming. Probably many of us are familiar with it. Of course, for every data, they have for every data they have their type. You understand? If we say number, number is a type of data. If we say string, string is a type of data. And then we can have different kinds of string. Name string, you understand, text string, and so on and so forth, like that. We can add different kinds of number. Okay, so what matter most is data type. So data type are basically different types of data. You understand? Because data as it is, they must be stored. They cannot just be an abstract entity like that. They must have what, a particular way of identifying them. Okay, so we have different data type. We have number, we have string. Okay, we have character. Let me give you an example. We can have a single character. We can have a etc. Even symbols are, as long as they are character. And we can have string, you know bash, you know street, and so on like that. And we can have number. We can have one, two, three, four. And you believe me, we have, let me just put the range from 0 to 9. We have different type of number. We have floating point numbers too, where floating point means numbers with what, decimals, number with decimal values. Okay, we have 3.14, 2.2, whatever you can talk about it. So we are just trying to digress and make everything easier. Of course, every variable must have their data type. For every variable, you must be able to identify what type of data is this variable holding. So variable holds data, and by default, the type of data that the variable holds help us to understand that type of, what kind of variable that variable is. So looking at this man here, we have name Shegun. Looking at this, obviously this variable name is holding a string value. So the data type of this variable is a not is a string variable. Looking at this variable age, it is holding a value 22, which is a number. So the data type of this variable age, it is what, obviously a number variable. you know Now I talk about number here. I talk about from 0 to 9 and normal, upwards, sorry, if you combine them, combinations. And then we talk about floating point numbers. No, now when it does not have, when numbers does not when we have numbers which does not have decimal attached to them, then they are known as integers. You understand? Integers are just plain numbers, real normal. How will I say it? The normal numbers that we see from 1 to 0, 1,000, 2,000, 30,000, as long as they don't have decimal points attached to them. or decimal values. Okay, so now we just digress. This is where we are talking about now. How do we now create this script? I think I've been able to talk about the basic thing. We talk about variable here. Now there is now another command in shell. We call it the read command. So the read command in shell is basically used for receiving inputs from the user. So that is the basic function of the read command. And how is it used? So general syntax of the read command, we have read, okay, then variable name. Because when you use the read command, you must actually make sure that the read command is when it prompts the user to enter a particular value, it must store that value inside a variable. So that's why we have the read command and what variable name. So I can do something like this. Sometimes when you just do read, if it collects, okay, if it collects value from the user, if it prompts the user to input value and we don't specify a place to store it, it will just prompt the user and there won't be anywhere to store it. Okay, for example, if I say read, look at, I have sent the read command on my terminal and now it is what prompting the user to enter. So I can say I am entering this prompt, and that's just it. If I ls, there is nowhere, no place it is being stored. It is not stored anywhere. But let me do something. Let me say read name. This, what is this going to do? It is going to what? It is going to um, prompt the user for a value, and the value will be stored inside this variable name. Obviously, I cannot say we want to ask the user to input the name, but normally it's just a normal variable, but by the name of the variable we can say that this variable is trying to collect name from the prompts. Yes, but basic understand that is needed is here is that we are using this read command and on this variable, that is whatever prompt the user enters after the read command has been what executed, it should store that value inside this name variable. So if I say read name, I can say Bamidele Michael. And automatically, this input has been stored inside this variable name. How do I check this variable? How do I get it? If I list file, I can't find it there. But when I do echo dollar name, you can see automatically it has what? It has given me this value. So automatically, this name variable here has been stored in the variable path environment of the shell environment.